It was almost 11 at night when the rain started. Cold, heavy drops hammered the empty streets of downtown Chicago, turning the asphalt into rivers of reflected light. Randy Thompson gripped the steering wheel, exhausted after a 12-hour shift. His 7-year-old daughter, Serena, slept in the passenger seat, clutching her mother's old scarf, a faded blue thing that still carried a faint trace of lavender perfume. Then he saw her, a woman walking alone on the wet sidewalk. No umbrella, no bodyguard, no luxury car waiting. He recognized her immediately, Ella Carter, CEO of Sterling Corp., the most powerful woman in the company, the one nobody dared look in the eye. But tonight she looked like she was about to collapse. What should he do? Randy had been driving for Sterling Corp. for 4 years now. 4 years of early mornings and late nights. 4 years of watching executives come and go through the rear-view mirror, never once looking at him as anything more than a function, a pair of hands on the wheel, a uniform behind the glass partition. He never complained. The job paid well enough to keep a roof over his daughter's head, and that was all that mattered. Serena stirred in her sleep, her small fingers tightening around the faded blue scarf draped across her chest. It had belonged to Denise, his wife. She had kissed him goodbye before he left for a night shift, and by morning she was gone, a drunk driver running a red light, and just like that, Randy became a single father. He still remembered the call, still remembered dropping to his knees in the break room, his phone slipping from his hand. The guilt had never left him. If he had been home that night, maybe he could have driven her instead. Maybe she would still be alive. But maybes didn't raise a child. So Randy buried his grief and kept moving. Now every night shift meant bringing Serena along. There was no one else to watch her, and daycare closed at 6. She had grown used to sleeping in the passenger seat, her mother's scarf pressed against her cheek like a security blanket. She never let it go, not even when Randy tried to wash it. Tonight had been longer than usual. A last-minute delivery across town, then waiting 2 hours for a client who never showed. By the time Randy clocked out, his shoulders ached and his eyes burned with exhaustion. All he wanted was to get Serena home, tuck her into bed, and maybe catch 4 hours of sleep before the morning shift. And now this. The woman on the sidewalk moved with slow, unsteady steps. She wasn't rushing to find shelter, wasn't looking for a place to wait out the storm. She walked like someone who had nowhere to go, like someone who had already given up. Randy knew who Ella Carter was. Everyone at Sterling did. She had built the company into a billion-dollar empire through sheer force of will. She was the woman who stepped out of the private elevator each morning, crossed the lobby with her security team, and delivered speeches with the kind of cold precision that made grown men nervous. But the woman on that sidewalk looked nothing like the Ella Carter he knew. Her shoulders were hunched. Her designer heels had been abandoned somewhere. She was barefoot now, splashing through puddles like she didn't even notice. Her hair, usually perfect, hung in wet strands around her face. She looked broken. Randy kept driving. His hands moved automatically, guiding the car forward, putting distance between himself and whatever he had just witnessed. It wasn't his problem. She was a CEO. She had resources, connections, people paid to take care of her. If she wanted help, she could call someone. A driver, a bodyguard, anyone. Who was he to interfere? A nobody. A black man in a company car approaching a white female CEO alone at night that could end his career in a heartbeat. One misunderstanding, one wrong word, and he would be out of a job. Maybe worse. He thought about Serena, about the rent due next week, about the parent-teacher conference he couldn't afford to miss. No, this wasn't his fight. But as the car moved forward, Randy found himself glancing at the rear-view mirror. The woman's figure grew smaller, swallowed by the rain and the darkness. And then he looked at Serena. She was still asleep, her face peaceful, her small hand clutching Denise's scarf. She looked so much like her mother, the same curly hair, the same way her brow furrowed slightly when she dreamed. A thought crept into his mind unbidden. Ella Carter was somebody's daughter too. Maybe her father was still alive. Maybe he wasn't. But somewhere at some point, someone had held her the way Randy held Serena. Someone had loved her before the world turned her into a title, a position, a name people feared. And tonight, that someone's daughter was walking alone in the rain, looking like she was about to fall apart. Randy thought about Denise again, about the night she died, about how she had been alone on that road, and how he would never know if she had been scared, if she had wished someone would stop. What if someone had seen her? What if someone had helped? He looked at Serena one more time, then he turned the car around. The rain seemed to grow heavier as Randy drove back, his heart pounding against his ribs. He told himself this was stupid. He told himself he was risking everything for a woman who probably wouldn't even remember his name. But he kept driving anyway. When he spotted her again, she had stopped walking. She stood motionless on the sidewalk, her head bowed, her body swaying slightly like a tree about to fall. Randy pulled the car to the curb and rolled down the window. The rain immediately splashed against his face, cold and sharp. She didn't look up. "Ms. Carter." His voice came out rougher than he intended. He cleared his throat and tried again. "Ms. Carter, I'm Randy Thompson. I work in the transportation department at Sterling. Can I give you a ride somewhere?" For a long moment, she didn't respond. The rain continued to fall, filling the silence between them. Then slowly she lifted her head. Her eyes met his through the rain, and Randy saw something there that made his breath catch. Not anger, not suspicion, emptiness, like someone who had been hollowed out from the inside. "I don't need help." Her voice was flat automatic, like she had said those words 1,000 times before. She turned and started walking again. Randy should have driven away. She had refused. He had done his part. There was nothing more to be done. But he thought about Serena again, about what he would want someone to do if his daughter was ever that lost, that alone. So instead of leaving, he put the car in drive and followed slowly, keeping pace with her, the engine humming softly through the rain. He didn't say anything else. He just stayed there, a quiet presence in the storm, letting her know she wasn't completely alone. After what felt like an eternity, Ella Carter stopped walking. She stood there, rain streaming down her face, and finally looked back at the car. Her eyes moved from Randy to the passenger seat where Serena slept peacefully, with the scarf pressed against her cheek. Something shifted in her expression. The walls didn't come down, but they cracked just slightly. Without a word, she walked to the car and opened the back door. She got in, and Randy, heart still pounding, pulled away from the curb and drove into the night. The silence inside the car was thick enough to cut. Randy kept his eyes on the road, hyper-aware of every small movement from the back seat. The rain continued to hammer against the windshield, and the wipers squeaked in a steady rhythm that only made the quiet more unbearable. Ella sat as far from him as possible, pressed against the door like she was ready to bolt at any moment. Her wet clothes dripped onto the leather seats, but she made no move to apologize or adjust. She just stared out the window, her reflection, a ghost in the rain-streaked glass. "Where to?" Randy finally asked, his voice careful. She didn't answer immediately. When she spoke, her voice was hoarse, stripped of the commanding tone he had heard in company meetings. "The Meridian Hotel, downtown." Randy nodded and adjusted the route. The Meridian was one of the most expensive hotels in the city, the kind of place where a single night cost more than his monthly rent. But he didn't ask questions. It wasn't his place. Serena shifted in her sleep, and the movement drew Ella's attention. Randy saw it in the rearview mirror, the way her eyes lingered on the child on the faded blue scarf, clutched in small fingers. Something flickered across her face. He couldn't name it, but it looked almost like pain. The scarf slipped from Serena's grasp and fell to the floor of the car. Before Randy could reach for it, Ella leaned forward and picked it up. She held it for a moment, her thumb brushing against the worn fabric before gently placing it back in Serena's hands. The little girl sighed in her sleep and pulled the scarf closer. Neither adult said a word. When they arrived at the Meridian, Randy pulled up to the entrance. The doorman immediately stepped forward with an umbrella, but Ella didn't move to open the door. She was still looking at Serena. Her mother's... The question came out soft, almost reluctant, like she hadn't meant to ask. Randy met her eyes in the mirror. Yes, my wife. She passed away. Serena hasn't let go of it since. He didn't elaborate. He never did not with strangers. The words were simple, clinical a fact rather than a wound. But Ella seemed to understand what lay beneath them. She's lucky to have something to hold on to. Her voice dropped lower and Randy had to strain to hear the next words. I don't have anything left of my mother. She died when I was 10. My father buried himself in work after that board meetings, business trips, anything to avoid being home. I raised myself. The confession hung in the air between them, unexpected and raw. Randy didn't know what to say. He hadn't anticipated this, hadn't expected the most powerful woman at Sterling Corp to reveal something so personal to a driver she barely knew. Before he could respond, Ella opened the door. The cold air rushed in, carrying the smell of rain. She stepped out, then turned back one last time. Thank you, Randy. It was the first time she had used his name. Then she was gone, disappearing through the golden doors of the hotel, and Randy was left alone with his sleeping daughter and the echo of her words. He would learn later what had happened that day, that Ella had signed her divorce papers that afternoon, the end of an 8-year marriage to a man who had been sleeping with her assistant for the last 2, that she had walked out of the lawyer's office and kept walking, not knowing where she was going, not caring about the rain. But that night all Randy knew was that something had shifted. Something small, almost imperceptible, but real. He drove home thinking it was over. A strange encounter, a moment of unexpected humanity, and then back to normal. Their worlds were too different. She would forget his name by morning, and he would go back to being invisible. But he was wrong. A week later, Randy received a call from the transportation office. A special request had come in from the executive floor, Ms. Carter needed a driver for an upcoming business trip, and she had asked for him specifically. She said you were punctual and didn't ask unnecessary questions. The dispatcher told him, sounding just as confused as Randy felt. He almost said no. Almost made up an excuse about scheduling conflicts or family obligations. But the extra pay would cover Serena's upcoming dental appointment, and he couldn't afford to turn down the work, so he said yes. The business trip was 3 days in Philadelphia. Randy drove while Ella worked in the back seat, her laptop open, her phone constantly ringing. She barely acknowledged him the first day, just gave him addresses and times, and he followed them without complaint. But on the second night, something shifted. They were stuck in traffic after a late dinner meeting, the city lights blurring through the rain-spotted windows. Ella had closed her laptop and was staring out at the crawling cars, her expression unreadable. Your daughter, she said suddenly. Serena, how old is she? Randy glanced at the mirror, surprised. 7. She's in 2nd grade. Does she like school? Most days. She's not a fan of math, but she loves reading. Goes through books faster than I can buy them. A hint of a smile touched Ella's lips, so brief Randy almost missed it. I was the same way. My mother used to take me to the library every Saturday. I would check out the maximum number of books allowed and finish them all before the next weekend. It was the second time she had mentioned her mother. Randy filed it away but didn't push. Serena would probably love that, he said instead. The library near us closed down last year. Budget cuts. Now we have to drive 30 minutes to the nearest one. Ella's brow furrowed slightly like she was making a mental note. She didn't say anything else, but there was something different in the silence that followed something less distant. Over the next few weeks, the calls kept coming. Late-night drives when Ella needed to clear her head. Airport pickups when she didn't want to deal with the company car service. Sometimes she worked in the back seat. Sometimes she just watched the city pass by. And sometimes she talked. Never about anything too personal. Mostly about work. The pressures, the endless meetings, the board members who questioned her every decision. Randy listened without judgment, offering the occasional comment but never overstepping. He learned that she had been CEO for 10 years, that she had fought her way up in an industry dominated by men who underestimated her at every turn, that she had sacrificed everything for the company, including, as she mentioned once with a bitter edge, a marriage that had ended in betrayal. "He was sleeping with my assistant," she said one night, her voice flat. "For 2 years. Everyone knew except me. Or maybe I knew and didn't want to see it." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "He said I loved Sterling more than I loved him. Maybe he was right. Maybe I don't know how to love anything else." Randy didn't ask for details. He didn't need to. He recognized the look in her eyes, the same one he saw in the mirror every morning. The look of someone who had lost something they couldn't get back. One evening, Serena came along for a ride. The babysitter had canceled last minute, and Randy had no choice but to bring her. He apologized profusely, but Ella waved it off. "It's fine," she said. "I don't mind." Serena, ever curious, spent the first half of the drive sneaking glances at the elegant woman in the back seat. Finally, her courage won out. "Are you my daddy's boss?" she asked. Ella's lips twitched. "Something like that." "You look tired," Serena observed with the bluntness only a child could manage. "My daddy looks tired, too. He works too much." Randy nearly choked. "Serena, that's not polite." But Ella shook her head. "No, she's right. I am tired." She looked at Serena with genuine interest. "What do you do when your daddy is tired?" Serena thought about it seriously. "I make him tea, and I let him pick the movie even if it's boring." Something softened in Ella's expression. She reached into her bag and pulled out a book, a picture book with a colorful cover, the kind sold at airport gift shops. "I bought this earlier today," she said. "I don't know why. I don't have anyone to give it to." She held it out to Serena. "Would you like it?" Serena's eyes went wide. She looked at Randy for permission, and when he nodded, she took the book with both hands like it was made of gold. "Thank you," she whispered. Then after a moment, "Do you have kids?" The question landed like a stone in still water. Ella's smile faded, and for a long moment she didn't speak. Randy watched her in the mirror, saw the way her jaw tightened, the way her hands folded in her lap. "No," she finally said. "I don't." Serena nodded thoughtfully. "That's okay. My daddy says family is the people who love you, not just the people who look like you." Randy felt his throat tighten. He didn't remember saying that it was something Denise used to tell Serena back when she was alive. The fact that Serena still remembered, still repeated it, made his chest ache. Ella didn't respond, but Randy saw her turn toward the window, and he could have sworn he saw her wipe her eyes. Later that night, Randy's co-worker Derek cornered him in the break room. Derek was 45, loud, and perpetually cheerful, the kind of man who made friends everywhere he went and considered it his personal mission to drag Randy out of his shell. "So," Derek said, leaning against the counter with a knowing grin, "you and the Ice Queen, what's going on there?" Randy poured himself a cup of coffee. "Nothing. She just requests me for drives. That's it." "That's it," Derek repeated clearly, unconvinced. "Randy, she hasn't requested a specific driver in 10 years. Now suddenly she can't go anywhere without you." "It's not like that." "Then what's it like?" Derek's tone softened, the teasing edge fading. "Look, man, I'm not trying to give you a hard time. I'm just saying you've been different lately. Less tired, almost happy." He let that sink in. "Denise has been gone a long time. You're allowed to move on." Randy's grip tightened on his coffee cup. "I'm not moving on. I'm just doing my job." Derek studied him for a long moment. "You know what I think? I think you're scared. Not of her, not of the job. You're scared of actually feeling something again." Randy didn't answer. He couldn't. Because Derek was right. Every night after dropping Ella off, Randy would drive home and sit in his car for 10 minutes before going inside. He would think about the way she looked at Serena, the rare smiles, the fragments of herself she had shared with him. And he would feel the guilt rising like bile in his throat. Denise had been gone for years, but some nights it felt like days. How could he let himself care about someone else? How could he even think about it? It felt like betrayal, like he was erasing Denise's memory, replacing her with someone new. And beyond the guilt, there was fear. Fear that if he let himself hope again, he would lose again. Fear that the universe would take away anyone he dared to love. So he kept his distance, stayed professional. Told himself that whatever connection existed between him and Ella was temporary, a strange intersection of two lonely lives that would eventually diverge. But then, he saw the drawing. Serena had been working on it for days, hiding it under her pillow, refusing to let Randy see. But one morning he found it on the kitchen table, left there by accident. It was a family portrait drawn in crayon. 3 figures stood in front of a house. Randy tall and brown-skinned, Serena small with curly hair, and next to them a woman with yellow hair and a blue dress. Underneath, in Serena's careful handwriting, "My family, Daddy, me, and Miss Ella." Randy stared at the drawing for a long time. His daughter had included Ella in their family. He didn't know whether to feel touched or terrified. That same day, Ella called him. But this time her voice was different, cold and distant, the way it had been before any of this started. "Randy, I wanted to let you know that I'll be using the regular car service from now on. Your work has been excellent, and I'll make sure to note that in your file." Randy felt something twist in his chest. "Did I do something wrong?" "No," Ella said quickly. "You've been nothing but professional. This is just... It's better this way. For both of us." The line went dead. Randy sat in his car, staring at his phone, trying to understand what had just happened. Everything had seemed fine, more than fine. So why was she suddenly cutting him off? He didn't know that earlier that day Ella had seen Serena's drawing. She had been walking through the transportation office on her way to the parking garage, a route she had started taking recently, though she wouldn't admit to herself why. Serena had been there waiting for Randy to finish his shift. The little girl had run up to her, proudly showing off the picture, pointing out each figure with obvious delight. "That's you," Serena had said, tapping the woman in blue. "I made your hair pretty." Ella had smiled, taken the drawing, admired it. She had thanked Serena for including her. And then she had gone back to her office and felt the walls closing in. Because Serena's drawing had forced her to confront something she had been avoiding for weeks, this wasn't just a professional arrangement anymore. These people were starting to feel like family. And Ella Carter didn't do family. Her mother had died when she was 10. Her father had buried himself in work and left her to raise herself. Her marriage had crumbled because she didn't know how to let anyone in. She was broken. She was incapable of love. And if she stayed in Randy and Serena's lives, she would only hurt them. So she did what she always did. She ran. Randy didn't fight it. He told himself it was for the best. She was a CEO, he was a driver. Whatever had been building between them was a fantasy, nothing more. But at night, when the apartment was quiet and Serena was asleep, he would sit by the window and stare at the city lights, feeling emptier than he had in years. And across town in her penthouse that had never felt more like a prison, Ella Carter did the same. 2 weeks passed. Then 3. Randy went back to his regular shifts, his regular routes, his regular life. He told himself nothing had changed. But everything felt different now, dimmer somehow, like someone had turned down the brightness on the world. Serena noticed. She stopped asking about Miss Ella after the first week when Randy couldn't give her a satisfying answer. But she grew quieter, more withdrawn. She stopped reading the picture book Ella had given her, leaving it untouched on her nightstand. And then one morning, Randy found the blue scarf stuffed in the back of Serena's closet. His heart dropped. He pulled it out, the familiar fabric soft and worn in his hands, still carrying that faint trace of lavender. Serena. He found her in the kitchen, pushing cereal around her bowl without eating. Why did you hide Mommy's scarf? She didn't look up. I don't want it anymore. What, sweetheart, you love this scarf. You've slept with it every night since... I don't want to remember anymore. Her voice cracked, and when she finally raised her eyes, they were filled with tears. Every time I hold it, you get sad. Every time I talk about Mommy, you look like you're going to cry. I don't want to make you sad anymore, Daddy. Randy felt like someone had reached into his chest and squeezed. He knelt down beside her, pulling her into his arms. She was so small, so fragile, carrying a weight no 7-year-old should ever have to bear. Serena, no. You don't make me sad. I just miss Mommy, that's all. But you never smile anymore. She whispered into his shoulder. You used to smile before. When Miss Ella was around, you smiled more. The words hit him like a punch. A few days later, Serena's teacher called. She wanted to meet with Randy after school. He sat in the tiny plastic chair meant for second graders, feeling oversized and out of place, while Mrs. Patterson pulled out a sheet of paper. Serena wrote this for a class assignment, she said gently. I thought you should see it. It was a short essay written in Serena's careful handwriting. The prompt had been, what I wish for. Serena had written, I wish my daddy could be happy. He works hard and he takes care of me, but he never laughs. Mommy always said Daddy was the prettiest when he smiled. I want to see him smile again. I want him to know it's okay to be happy, even if Mommy is gone. Randy read it 3 times. The words blurred as his eyes filled with tears. He had spent years trying to protect Serena from his grief. Years of holding everything in, of being strong, of never letting her see him break. And all this time she had been watching, learning, believing that love meant suffering, that happiness was something to feel guilty about. He had taught his daughter that joy was a betrayal. That night, after Serena fell asleep, Randy drove to the cemetery. He hadn't been back since the funeral. He had told himself it was because he was too busy, too tired, too practical for sentimental gestures. But the truth was simpler. He was afraid. Afraid that standing at Denise's grave would make the loss real in a way he couldn't handle. The cemetery was quiet under the moonlight. Randy walked between the headstones until he found hers, a simple marble marker with her name, her dates, and the words, beloved wife and mother. He stood there for a long time, not knowing what to say. I'm sorry, he finally whispered. I've been trying so hard to hold on to you that I forgot how to live. And now Serena thinks happiness is wrong. She thinks loving someone means losing them. His voice broke. That's not what you would have wanted. You always told me to keep going, to find joy wherever I could. And I've been so scared of letting you go that I've been teaching our daughter to be afraid too. The wind stirred the leaves around him, and for a moment he could almost hear Denise's voice, that gentle laugh, the way she used to tease him about being too serious. You'd probably tell me I'm being an idiot, he said, half smiling through his tears. You'd tell me to stop moping and go after what I want. He took a shaky breath. There's someone, Denise. Someone who makes me feel like maybe I'm not just surviving anymore. Someone who sees me, really sees me. And I've been so afraid of betraying you that I pushed her away. He touched the cold marble of the headstone. I'll never stop loving you, but I think it's time for me to start living again. For me, and for Serena. Across the city, Ella Carter was falling apart. The board meeting had been a disaster. She had misread the quarterly projections, fumbled her response to a critical question, and watched the confidence drain from the faces of her investors in real time. Afterward, one of the senior board members had pulled her aside. Ella, I've known you for 10 years. I've never seen you like this. Whatever is going on in your personal life, you need to get it sorted. The company can't afford a CEO who isn't fully present. She had nodded, promised to do better, and retreated to her office to stare at the wall. That night, she went home to her empty penthouse and poured herself a glass of wine she didn't drink. She wandered through the rooms feeling like a ghost in her own life. In the back of her closet, she found an old box she hadn't opened in years. Inside were the few things she had kept from her childhood report cards, photographs, a dried flower from a school dance. And at the bottom, wrapped in tissue paper, was a bracelet. It was cheap, the kind of thing you could buy for a few dollars at any department store. A thin chain with a small heart charm. Her mother had given it to her for her 10th birthday, just a few months before she died. Ella had hidden it away because looking at it hurt too much. Because wearing it meant admitting she still missed her mother, still needed her, still wished things had been different. She slipped it onto her wrist. The metal was cold against her skin, but as it warmed, something shifted inside her. She thought about her mother, really thought about her for the first time in years. The Saturday library trips, the bedtime stories, the way she used to say that being strong didn't mean being alone. Her mother hadn't raised her to be this person, this cold, isolated woman who pushed away anyone who got too close. Ella had built her own prison brick by brick and called it success. The letter arrived at her office the next morning. It was handwritten, delivered by internal mail with no return address. But she recognized the handwriting from the transportation logs she had reviewed weeks ago. She opened it with trembling hands. "I don't know if I have any right to write this," it began. "But I've stayed quiet for too long in my life, and I don't want to do that anymore. I'm not writing to you as an employee to a CEO. I'm writing to you as one person to another, two people who have both lost someone, who both know what it's like to be alone, even in a crowded room. I don't need you to be the woman everyone at Sterling sees. I don't need the power, or the title, or the image. I just need Ella, the woman who stood in the rain that night, the woman who looked at my daughter's scarf and understood. If you're scared of hurting me and Serena, you should know we've already lost the person we loved most in the world. We know what grief looks like. We've lived with it every day. But we're also learning that grief doesn't have to be the end, that there's room for more love, more hope, more life. You don't have to be perfect. None of us are. Randy." Ella read the letter 7 times. And then she made a decision. The company-wide meeting was scheduled for Friday morning. It was supposed to be a standard quarterly update, numbers, projections, strategic initiatives, the kind of meeting where Ella delivered a polished speech and everyone nodded along. But when she took the stage, she set her notes aside. "I've been CEO of this company for 10 years, she began. "In that time, I've built a reputation for being tough, controlled. Some of you might use less flattering words." A ripple of nervous laughter moved through the crowd. "I took pride in that reputation. I believed that leadership meant never showing weakness, never needing anyone, never letting emotion interfere with business." She gripped the podium, steadying herself. "I was wrong." The room went still. "A few months ago, I was at the lowest point of my life. I had just signed my divorce papers. I had lost my sense of purpose, lost any connection to the person I used to be. And on that night, when I was walking alone in the rain, ready to give up, someone stopped. Not because I was his boss, not because he wanted anything from me, just because he saw another human being who needed help." She found Randy in the back of the room. He was standing near the door, frozen in place, staring at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "That man taught me something I had forgotten. That strength isn't about standing alone. It's about having the courage to let people in, to admit when you're struggling, to ask for help." She took a breath. "From now on, this company is going to change. We're going to build a culture where people matter more than positions, where vulnerability isn't weakness, where we take care of each other not because it's good for business, but because it's the right thing to do. And I'm going to start by being honest with all of you. I don't have all the answers. I need your help, not as employees, but as people." The silence stretched for a long moment. Then slowly someone started clapping. Then another. Then another. The applause spread through the room like a wave. Randy watched her step down from the stage, her eyes bright with something that looked like tears and hope combined. Derek leaned over and elbowed him in the ribs. "That was about you, wasn't it?" Randy didn't answer. He was already moving toward the door. She met him in the hallway, away from the crowd. Neither of them spoke at first. They just stood there, the noise of the meeting fading behind them. "I got your letter," Ella finally said. "I noticed." A small smile tugged at her lips. Was that too much, the speech? It was perfect. She looked down at her wrist at the cheap bracelet with the heart charm. "I found this last night. My mother gave it to me before she died. I've been hiding it for over 30 years because I was afraid of what it would make me feel." She met his eyes. "I don't want to hide anymore, Randy." He reached out and took her hand. It was the first time they had ever touched. "Neither do I." 3 weeks later, on a cool Sunday afternoon, Randy, Serena, and Ella sat together in a small park near Randy's apartment. The sky was overcast, threatening rain. Serena was trying to teach Ella how to fly a kite. It wasn't going well. "You have to run faster," Serena commanded, bouncing impatiently. Ella, breathless and laughing, attempted another sprint across the grass. The kite wobbled, rose for a moment, then crashed back down. "I'm hopeless at this," she admitted, walking back to the bench where Randy sat watching. "She learned from her mom," he said. "Denise was a kite champion, won a contest when she was 12. Never let me forget it." Ella sat down beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. "Do you think she would have minded Denise, about us?" Randy thought about the cemetery, about Denise's laugh, about all the times she had told him that life was too short to be afraid. "No," he said. "I think she would have told me it took me long enough." Serena came running back, grabbing both their hands. "It's going to rain. We have to go." The first drops began to fall as they stood up together, but this time none of them minded the rain.